Those you girls.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our next conversation with the Regional Foxtrotting Horse Foundation. We've really enjoyed having all these, and we're really excited about the conversation this evening. This is one of those topics that a lot of people have questions about. I will start off with this. I don't know say if it's a warning or not. If you are a equine color expert, this is not the conversation for you or webinar. I've asked our two experts tonight to keep this pretty broad, pretty general for that common horse owner as we go through, even though they're certainly capable of getting down into a lot of those details. So just kind of wanted to put that out there. This is really that overarching conversation for equine color. So I'm really excited to be talking to two wonderful ladies this evening to talk about equine color. And I'm going to have both of them introduce themselves to everyone and then share a little bit about how they got into horses and Missouri Foxtrotters specifically. So we will start with Susan Tomlinson.
Thank you, Amber. My name obviously is Susan. I have been in the Foxtrotter breed. I think I got my first one back in about mid-90s. I fell in love with them. I had just gotten back from University of Findlay in Findlay, Ohio, getting a degree in equestrian studies. And I fell in love with the breed. They're a quarter horse with gait. They're everything that I wanted. So they've kind of got me stuck.
Very good. And then next we have Kimberly Seawright.
Hi, Amber. My name is Kimberly, obviously. I got into horses when I was a young girl. I was born around them, raised quarter horses and APHA paints, showed my whole life, got out of horses about the time I finished my veterinarian assistant certification, worked for a large veterinarian with equine, and then got out of horses for a little while to raise my daughter, and then got back into them as an older adult. And first time I rode a foxtrotter, I was with Susan Tomlinson. And I said, yep, I rode Luna. And I said, I'm never going back to quarter horse. And I never went back.
So how did color become an interest for both of you? Kimberly, we can start with you on that. How did you get interested in equine color?
So I actually started with quarter horses and paints. I always loved the paints, the different patterns, the different, Toby being my least favorite. I like the frames, the Splash, the Sabino. That was where my love was. So that's how I got into color. And of course, breeding paints to quarter horses, you can crossbreed that way. So that's where I went with it.
Okay. And how about you, Susan?
I think I've always loved the different colors and the different possibilities. Equine genetics is just so much fun for me to talk about, to learn about. It's like opening a present at Christmas time. You never know what you're going to get, but you can kind of plan for that perfect unicorn. I know that color doesn't really matter as far as gait or disposition goes, but it's just frosting on the cake. You can have this beautiful curb appeal animal and also have the brains and the gait to go along with it.
Yeah. And, a lot of people want something specific too, and so I think understanding color is helpful. Whatever, everyone has a favorite color, right, of a horse. And so understanding that I think is very useful. So we're going to jump into our conversation, and we have pulled some just really basic pictures that we're going to show to everyone so you kind of know what we're talking about when we talk about these different colors. There's lots of variations to all of these, but we just picked out one to show and help go through this conversation. So we're going to share our presentation here a little bit and continue our conversation. So we thought we'd start and talk about some of the pretty basic colors, or what they call base colors. And we will start our conversation with red and kind of go into the variations of that. So Red horse, a lot of in the equine world, they call it sorrel or chestnut, especially in our breed. But talk to me a little bit about the red gene and what it is and the genetics behind it.
The first thing is chestnut is red. If you test that horse, it's going to be red.
Sorrel as well.
Swirl's same thing. The difference is, to me, on a chestnut horse is the darker red pigments that are in the mane and the tail and the points. That all that means is the red is concentrated in those areas. That horse is still a red horse.
So when we talk about red as a base color, we're talking about the fact that the horse is recessive for red only. They do not carry a black gene because black is dominant. So red color is called pheomelanin, and pheomelanin is just that red shade.
Okay. So you talked about it a little bit, Kimberly, as far as I know, Missouri Fox Trotting horse may be one of the few breeds that distinguishes when you register a horse. They want to know if it's sorrel or chestnut. And from listening to you, genetically, they're the same, correct? Is that
Correct.
what I'm hearing?
Correct. Genotype, they're the same. That means if you color test them, sorrel against a chestnut, their color tests are both going to be little e.
Okay.
Phenotype is what you're seeing when you look at the horse.
And that's the shade, the different shades
Correct.
of those that we see.
Correct.
Such as a liver chestnut or a bright red sorrel, whatever way you want to look at it. Flaxen mane and tail, different modifiers like sooty that make them look almost black. They're such a dark red.
Right.
Okay. So that was gonna be my question, is really what causes a different, if they're genetically the same, what causes the different shades?
It's just a higher concentration of red on the points.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's not tested yet. In other words, there's no test for flaxen and there's no test for sooty. It's just on anecdotal evidence. So what you see in front of you.
Okay. So a lot of times when you look online, you'll see someone that talks about, especially with a red horse, like, hey, their grandmother was palomino or a different color. And so they talk about their potential for having that color. Is that true with a red horse? Or, how does genetics and history and a pedigree kind of play into what a horse can pass along?
So typically there's one certain thing that you can always guarantee, and that's a red bred to a red is going to have a red. So whenever you look at a sorrel or a chestnut horse and you want to breed it to another chestnut or sorrel horse, the outcome is 100% sorrel or chestnut. There's not going to be any chance of a dilution gene like cream, which would create a palomino. Palomino is dominant while the cream gene is dominant. And therefore, the parent, one of the two parents, would have to show that color to be able to pass it on.
Okay. Anything additional about the red color that people should know?
I don't think so.
Do you have any ideas, Amber, of what you're?
No, before I move to colors, if there's something else you wanted to say about it, I wanted to give you an opportunity.
I don't really think that there's anything specific other than when you're looking at a coat color chart, it is they use the two little e's, undercase e's, to show a red horse.
Okay. All right, so let's then switch over and talk about black. Sort of the polar opposite of red, right? So we're going to talk
That's
about
right.
black.
So black pigment is dominant. So on a black horse, you know that it's going to have at least one dominant black gene. And that's why the horse looks black to the eye. So a horse can have one or two dominant black genes, and that's in the extension loci. So instead of those two little undercase e's that we talked about for red, it's actually an uppercase or capitalized E for a black horse. So when you look at a black horse, you can tell that they have black pigment, which is eumelanin, evenly dispersed throughout their whole body. There are some horses that fade, some that do not, but it's just individuals. There's no way to necessarily say that this horse is not black because it's fading, or this horse is a true black because it doesn't fade. They all are genetically both black horses.
Okay. So you talked about the big E, there's 2 genes. So you could have one with that would still carry the red gene then as well.
Correct. So if you had a horse that was tested for red black on, say, Animal Genetics or UC Davis, and you got a report back that the horse had one big dominant, or it was a capital letter E and then a lowercase e, that means that the horse has one dominant agouti or dominant extension, excuse me, and one recessive extension gene. What that means is the horse then can produce red or black pigment 50% of the time, depending on if they throw the big dominant agouti or extension or the under lowercase recessive extension.
Okay. And then you see some horses advertised as homozygous black, especially stallions. So explain to me what that means.
That is 2 dominant extension E's. So when you look at that color test, you're going to have 2 capital E's. That horse will throw black-based babies 100% of the time.
Now you'll notice that she said black-based, because as we go into bay and into some of the modifiers, you can still have that black pigment, but it might be modified by another gene, such as the agouti gene. And the agouti gene takes that black pigment and it restricts it just to the points.
Right.
Every horse carries agouti, but many horses carry recessive agouti, which means that the horse can then be black if it has black pigment.
For example, a bay horse. A bay horse is black pigmented horse with agouti.
With a dominant agouti.
Yes, with dominant agouti.
So since we're talking about that, I'll switch my pictures here and we'll have a bay mare here. And so if you said every horse has agouti, which is what, explain that comment to me a little bit,
Sure.
Susan. So if every horse has it, then why isn't every horse bay?
So when you look at this mare, she's a blood bay, beautiful horse. You can tell that her body is red and her points, legs, mane and tail are black. That's because that black color or pigment is restricted to her points. So she has both red and black pigment on her body. If you'll notice her foal looks like it's a black foal in full color. And that horse does not have that dominant agouti gene. So they both have the extension gene, which is the gene that says red or black. So both of these individuals have at least one dominant E in extension to show that they have black pigment. Then when you go to their agouti gene, or the location on their genes that tell us if that black is restricted to the points or evenly dispersed in the whole body. So for example, that baby looks like it turned into a black foal. What baby is that, Amber?
It is a black foal.
Okay, so that foal does not have that dominant agouti that restricts the black pigment to the points, but has recessive agouti that there is black pigment evenly throughout the whole body. Now, the only place that this is a problem is that agouti only affects black pigment. So on a sorrel that does not have black pigment, or a chestnut,
Or chestnut.
you won't know what that agouti is going to do. It's silent because there's no black pigment to restrict or not to restrict.
Okay.
Agouti only affects black pigment.
So it sounds like if you have what would be a little a, right? So recessive agouti, that allows pigment throughout the body. It's the
Yes.
dominant agouti that suppresses it.
Yes.
Okay, and so are there variations then of agouti? So I don't know how all that works, because some bays look different, right? Their points look a little bit different as far as how those look.
So there was some conjecture and a test made back a few years ago, testing for seal. And seal was like a brown bay gene or a black bay gene. They've kind of debunked the test. I still think that there's something there with a seal gene, but right now it's debunked,
Okay,
meaning they don't believe in it anymore. They just say
Right.
there's either dominant agouti for a restricted black pigment or a recessive agouti for equally black throughout the body.
okay,
So that's how you get in theory, that's how you get the blood bays versus the brown black bays. It's still a bay, but something in that agouti is different.
And we don't know if it's just, linking to city or if there's something else there, if there's a mutation, but that's for a different session. So basically there's dominant agouti or recessive agouti creating both the bay or the black phenotype.
okay. So a question I see a lot about bays is, so we just went through and we talked about what a red horse was, and we talked about how black could be homozygous, so you could have two biggies, two extensions. Can a bay horse also have two biggies and still have
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
that red would still show up on their body, even though that they would always produce a black base.
Mhm.
Correct. It's
Offspring.
kind of a strange thing to think that a bay horse that has red pigment would be, as they say, homozygous for black. But they do have they can have two dominant extension loci and have a dominant agouti loci and still be a bay.
Okay,
Two black genes for a bay.
Again,
Yes.
bay is black based.
okay,
So it is a black horse where its black's been restricted to its points.
all right. And then a horse could also be homozygous for agouti, as far as dominant agouti, where they would always
Correct.
pass that on as well.
Yep.
Okay. All
Or
right,
homozygous recessive.
right, where they wouldn't have the ability to do
Right.
that.
Correct.
Okay. So let's jump in and start talking a little bit about variations to those. So those are the three that a lot of people talk about as being sort of the basic colors, and then you can kind of play around with it, right? Make other things. So one you see a lot in our breed is Palomino. And a lot of people want Palomino. So talk to me a little bit about what this is genetically, and then we can talk about how other colors can be modified as well.
Genetically, this is a red-based horse with cream.
Palomino is.
That's what a palomino is.
Okay.
So when you add the cream gene, which is a dilution gene modifier, to the base colors of sorrel or red, whatever you want to call it, bay and black, you're going to get three individual colors: palomino for the red base, buckskin for the bay base, and smoky black for the black base. Many people and genetics believe that black hides cream, and so you can't really see cream gene on a black horse. They just look like a black horse. So sometimes it's better to test so that you know if your horse carries that cream gene. And I would only worry about that if it came from a parent that had a cream gene. So for example, this individual in this picture with the doggy friend is a palomino. So like Kim said, it's a red horse with one cream gene. Cream works in a halfway and a full way switch, meaning one gene of cream can create a palomino, but if you get two cream genes, it dilutes double and you get a cremello. So then that individual would be homozygous for cream gene, meaning that any offspring that they had would always carry one cream gene.
Okay. And then that would also double and called double dilute down the other colors as well.
Correct.
Yes.
So a buckskin becomes a Perlino and a smoky black becomes a smoky cream.
And I will just say, you know, and my family and I have produced a lot of smoky black horses over the years. And I will say you do have to test them because sometimes you think, you know what
I've
you
got
have.
a black filly in my field. I swore it was smoky and she is not.
Yep. I've had them both ways where I'm like, this one is this. And then you test them and they're not that. So I will point that out to everyone. So
Another modifier, Amber, would be like the dun gene, which is another dilution gene. Dun gene works the same way that cream works in the respect that it dilutes the body color down. You have some markers for dun, like you have the dorsal stripe down their back. They sometimes have like the leg bar and the ear tips, the shoulder patch. They have cobwebbing, which is a type of spotting pattern on their face. These are all markers for having that dun gene, but typically the horse in this image is basically is a bay base dun. He's got a dominant E for extension and a dominant A and a goody. He looks a little more like what you would call a gria, which is a black base dun, but again, he's one of those black bays, and so he actually has the dominant agouti.
So what's the name for a horse like this?
I just call him a dun.
Okay.
It's just simpler for me to just call him dun. Bay dun is what the correct term is for a dominant E and a dominant A with the dun gene, but I just call it dun, which is what a lot of people do.
And so then it's a red dun.
If they're sorrel or red based.
And then the black dun is what you were just talking about, is what he looks like. And they'll be sort of lighter colored as well on their body.
Yep.
Like this.
Yep.
So does the dun gene then work very similar to the cream gene as far as it's just a modifier?
It is. It's a modifier. So you always have those three base colors, and then the dun gene works on top of that. So you can't have a dun foal without a dun parent. It's dominant as well. And so it will always express if it's present.
It's a dilution.
Now you can have cream and dun on the same individual.
Yes.
And so you would have what they call like a dun skin or a dunalino for a red dun with cream. A dun skin is a bay dun or buckskin with dun. And then you have like a smoky gris is what they call it.
Okay. So in the cream gene and the dun gene, there is impossible for them to hide, right? So you have to have a parent, a direct parent that carries that.
And that's 100% the case, unless we're talking about certain places where they might be masked by a different color. Gray. So gray can mask a lot of base colors and a lot of modifiers. You can also, like I have a Griemer, and I wish I would have given you some pictures to post. Her dun stripe is very hard to see with her roaming, but she is both dun and roe.
So basically these colors can hide. Dun can hide, masked on gray, roan, cream, any of those dilution genes, or like gray that changes the whole look of the horse itself. All that can hide on one of those.
So you're going to see that pedigree that has that done in the genetics and the genealogy. So for example, if I had a Dunalino or I had a Cremello that had a dun gene, if it got a cream gene from both parents and a dun gene, you might not see that dun factor because it would be so light with that Cremello effect.
You would still just be looking at the parents for that.
Correct. Yes. Or you would test it, which is what I would do.
Okay. So you brought up gray. And I actually mentioned before we started today, on my little list of questions, I didn't put gray, but we probably should talk about gray a little bit. So we'll just kind of throw it in here. So talk to me a little bit about how the gray gene works.
So gray has to have a gray parent. It's the only way it's passed on. So it can be passed on 50% of the time by one that carries it, or if a horse is homozygous for gray, it's passed on 100% of the time. It is one of those colors that the parent has to be in order to pass it on.
And it will always mask a color, correct?
Yes,
Eventually.
yes. Double dilutes, roans, blacks, reds, any of them, you know, that gray out, they have a base color. So if I'm looking at a gray horse or a double dilute horse, I'm going to test for the base color to know what that horse's pigmented skin, its genotype is when I breed.
So again, and I'm sure this is true in other breeds. I know in the Missouri fox riding horse breed, we can put that information on registration papers. I know a lot of times, I've again had a lot of gray foals, and always put
Going gray.
their genotype. Actually, I mean, you register them as gray, but in the note section, you can actually add in. So down the road, if someone needed that information, they would actually have it.
I really like the idea of doing that. And in fact, I'm registering foals that I've color tested. I'm actually adding that color test to my registration papers.
And that's what I've started doing as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful down the road. So then you don't have to keep two pieces of paper. That's why I like to do it, because I'm a little, keeping track of one's hard enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. All right. So another color we wanted to talk about is one I don't know a whole lot about, and that is roan. And how
I don't either, so I'm leaving this one to the experts.
So this is actually one of my mares in this picture. The foal was she's a first-time mom here, and she's actually an excellent mother. But the foal was the cross of two blue roan parents, and both parents are double dominant E as well. So we know by parentage that this foal is homozygous dominant extension, meaning he has two black genes. He cannot produce a foal from him that would be red based. But I was curious if he carried two roan genes. So I actually had him tested, and the test came back that he only had one roan gene present. He is starting to roan out now, and roans are kind of frustrating that the day that they're born, you can't tell if they're roan or not typically. Usually you have to wait till they start to shed. And roans are characteristically, there are two different kind of roan patterns. This is what I call true roan. And you'll notice that her body is a fairly even mix of white and base color hair. And then you'll notice that her head, even though it's dusty, and her legs have that iconic inverted V above her knee of black pigment. And then her lower leg would be black, her mane and tail are black. So that's the true roan, and typically what you'll look for in a true roan. On a grain horse that a lot of people think is a roan, you'll see a lot of roaning or grain on the face as well. And that's one way to tell the difference also genetically if the parent was roan or gray. But Sabino, which is a white spotting pattern, also has a roan component to it, but you'll typically see those high white stockings that blaze face, and is a different modifier than this roan gene, which we use the letters RN for on genetic tests.
And so is it a little bit similar to the genes modifiers we've already talked about, that you have to have a roan parent?
Correct. It's a dominant gene as well.
Okay.
So with roaning, you can have a red roan, which would be a red or sorrel chestnut base. You could have a bay roan. So that's an obvious, it's going to be a bay base with the roaning, or the black, which people call blue roans. Black roan is also correct because we're just talking about the base color and then the roan gene.
Okay.
You can also have other modifiers added in. So a buckskin roan, a palomino roan, et cetera, et cetera.
I will say, typically, the difference in knowing if this is going to be a gray horse or a blue roan horse is the fact that when a baby is born like this, if they're gray instead of roan, you're going to have some goggles around their eyes. they'll roan on their face before they will on their body. That
Okay.
is a big indicator of the difference between roan and gray.
You've probably seen that a lot with different grays that you've raised, Amber.
Yeah, I've gotten real good at identifying some of the grays. I've never had a roan horse before. I do know from looking at old pedigrees and stuff, I do think there's a lot of horses that are miscolored
Yes.
from years ago, because there's surprisingly a lot of roans in our breed.
Yeah, and they were grays or they were Sabinos.
You know,
We had
yeah.
a Mary Boy Sensation is an iconic Sabino. And so when you look at him, that's the coloration that a lot of people call those blue roans
Right.
or those roads. Now, it's interesting, gray horses, there's a couple of ways to tell that they're going to gray out when they're young. And one of them is that they actually look like they have adult color when they're born.
Mhm.
And we call it hyperpigmentation. And for some reason, gray does that. So if they look a little too much like an adult coat color when they're born, then there might be an indication of a gray gene present.
I've noticed too, and especially on our red foals, is their legs seem darker. I mean, they have a very distinct look.
Yep.
If they're Palomino going gray, they look like a little buckskin.
They do. They actually have a
Yes.
white mane, kind of a mixed tail, and chocolate colored legs.
And your buckskins will look more bay.
Yes, yeah. So, you know, the gray gene is very interesting to deal with that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to, we can go back over here and look at some other things. I pulled up a website, and this is honestly just a stallion list. So if you've listened to all of our conversations, we have the National Association of Breeders on previously, but I thought this would be a good place to show some different colors, just a
That'd be
listing of pictures, so we could show that. So I will share this again for everyone. So since we were talking about a gray, so here's an example of a gray horse with a little bit of, they can color change, but this is gray.
And typically grays will go through those color changes. They start out darker unless they were born like a light sorrel or red color. This gray obviously has lost a lot of his pigment. So I would imagine that he's probably 3/4 of the way through his pigment change.
Yeah.
And they get to the point where they're a white horse, or they'll even get flea bit. And it's not really where fleas bite them, but they get little specks of color throughout their hair coat. And I think it's quite endearing. I think it looks beautiful on them, but it is one of the modifiers or one of the things that you'd look for on a gray animal.
So this is something that the rate at what they gray out is kind of interesting to me, having had several grays. I've had some that by 2 were pretty much white. And then I've had others that were 15, 16 years old and still had their black.
What I always think is really interesting is seeing a Palomino gray, because they actually get black or that dark gray pigment
Where they look sooty.
and they actually get dappled gray, which is so
Yeah.
weird to me.
Yeah.
But I think it's super neat.
But there doesn't seem to be a lot of, I mean, we've had offspring out of the same horse that have grayed at different paces. So I don't know
Yeah.
how you predict that.
And I don't know what that is either. There's no test for
Yeah,
that.
there's no
specifically.
signifier for that to know, how soon you're looking at a 2-year-old that's black versus a 2-year-old that's already white. There's no signifier there.
So that's an example of a gray horse. What other? Oh, so we're jumping around here, so I apologize to everyone.
Can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you actually have a picture of that Rockham as a foal?
I don't. I just have whatever's on
Okay.
this site.
So pull up Phantom of the Ozarks, if you will, and we'll show a double dilute with a buckskin or a bay base. So this would be a buckskin if he only had one cream gene, but because he has 2 cream genes, he is actually called a Perlino. So his genetic profile would be a dominant E for extension, a recessive E. So he has red and black. Then he has 1 dominant A, 1 recessive A, and then he has 2 cream genes.
And
So
that's,
this horse bred to a sorrel could have 50-50 Palomino or buckskin or smoky black. Well, it'd be 33%.
33%.
and that's why, if you read on his description, they talk about guaranteed color, right? It's the 2 cream genes that guarantee that.
Correct.
Yes.
And I think it's fine because red is a color as well, but I know what they're talking about. They're talking about guaranteed cream dilution.
Okay. When we were talking about gray, Kimberly, were you wanting to see a foal that was gonna turn gray?
Yeah, just to show a comparison on base coat. I mean, I've seen bay horses be completely white that carry the gray be completely white by 6 years old, but they
Right.
started out bay.
So obviously this is a different horse, but I can show you, hopefully this will work. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, there's
Yes,
a Palomino going
perfect.
gray.
This is a Palomino going gray, and that's what I
Yep.
was talking about with the dark legs.
Yep.
It's iconically Palomino going gray. There was a breeder back when color genetics was just beginning that we really didn't know. We didn't have the testing capacity that we have nowadays. And they call this silvered apple, but this is not a silvered apple. This is actually Palomino going gray.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so disappointing. Everyone's like, oh, you got a buckskin. No, nope, I didn't.
Now, if it had a black mane and tail, I might go, wait a minute.
And yeah,
Still going gray.
yeah. So that's just an example of people wanted to see that. Like I said, that, and I probably somewhere have a red horse that does that too, but we at least from our horses, typically see that darkened leg thing gray.
Yep. That's iconic right there.
All right, so what other colors, see what else we have in here that we can, so smoky black.
Yep, put Bentley up there. That's a good example. He doesn't show the cream gene to me at all. His legs look a little lighter there, but I don't think that they actually are. I think that's from being in the chat or whatever. He is a beautiful animal. He's got a great coat color. It's very shiny, very black to me. I don't see smoky black when I look at him, but I know that he is out of a Palomino sire.
So I guessed smoky on this one just because of the red tips on the mane and the golden hues in the tail. But that was just my guess. My filly has that same thing and she is not smoky. So
Yeah, I've also seen some smokies that look a little chocolatey
Yeah.
color, but I've also seen them just this pitch black too. So it's really one to test. So, you know, if you get a surprise Palomino out of a black horse, that can tip you off as well. All right.
handsome.
Let's see. Well, let's pull up this horse because I think that Captain America is very interesting from a couple standpoints. So he has all these white markings. So we haven't really talked about white on a horse. So talk to me a little bit about how that happens.
Well, this one's a little rare in the respect that he is what we call the splash gene.
Yep.
And the splash gene is different from Sabino. Sabino's a lot more common. You're going to get the blaze face, the high white socks in the back typically, and you'll have chin white. This horse, I don't know if he's tested for Sabino as well, but I do know that he carries the splash gene and has thrown it. Splash is like you held the animal in your hand and you dipped him in paint from the bottom up. So I have a splash filly that has a bald face, 2 blue eyes, and 4 white stockings. And that's another pretty iconic look for the splash gene. Linda Visiono had a beautiful splash filly born the other day,
Yes.
and she's excessive. She's actually got white all the way up to her chest and her belly.
Okay.
And she's really neat looking.
So
So
that would be different than someone that a horse that just has, you know,
White markings.
or
right,
just
a
white.
star,
Mhm.
a snip.
A good signifier of that is also that bottom lip white. That's and then his stockings in the back don't go up as high as typical with the splash or Sabino, either one. But his blue eye on the other side is a dead giveaway away that it's a white pattern at play.
Okay,
And his bottom lip white.
okay. That makes sense. So, I don't know if we
Is
have
there a horse on there that's Sabino?
I was trying to look.
Yeah, I saw one. I thought I saw one. Maybe I didn't. What about
Does Mitzi have one on there that's on there? Devil in Disguise.
Boogie.
Pull him up.
yeah?
No, he might just be Sorrel.
I think
He's a
he's just-
Sorrel.
Yeah.
What about Boogie? Boogie.
No, no.
I don't think he's on this particular list. So this was just a list that was easy to pull up to go
Oh, okay.
through. We haven't talked a lot about buckskin, so we can do that here.
I've done it, and he is a typical buckskin. He's got the very black legs, mane and tail points. He might have what you call the sooty gene. I know that quite a lot of bronze pride and their offspring can have that sooty, which gives them a little more of that bronzed look. If you look at his hip, you can see some of those kind of the black flicking and that buckskin gold color.
It almost gives it almost a little bit of a red hue to it.
Okay.
Just the like the gold. You know what I mean there?
Just a deeper,
Yeah.
a deeper gold.
So that's what you were saying earlier that there's not a test for.
Mhm. So buckskin is a bay horse with a cream gene.
Okay. But the sooty part or the sort of black hairs through your
Mhm.
body, that's the part that's not, you can't test.
Right.
Sooty is not testable.
All right, so. Only other one that's on here is, and I don't know if we want to get in, start talking a little bit about spots or not. A little bit more complicated.
Minimal Toby.
So
Okay.
Tobiano is a spotting pattern that is also dominant. You'll see Tobianos that are minimal like this all the way to the point where they're mostly white with a little bit of color on their stifle area and their chest. Tobianos typically have white markings on their legs and minimal white markings on their face, like a star. But you might have a blaze, but they generally don't have a bald face unless there's something else at play.
Okay.
Another thing to look for in the Toby pattern is like what she said, their face will usually be dark and they will usually have a chest plate of color.
White will always be over their dorsal.
Yes.
So you'll notice on his neck, there's white across his dorsal line, his top line. So it looks like you poured the paint from above him onto his body.
Okay, that makes sense now when you're talking about the above and from the bottom up versus, that's great.
So if you, I mean, it just a touch quickly and not go in depth on white patterns. Splash, Sabino. It looks like you
Frame.
grabbed them. It looks like you grabbed them from the tail and mane and set them in paint. Frame, usually their colors on their back line and their belly, you've got color on their, and they're framed in the middle. They look like a picture frame. Toby's, their white pattern crosses their dorsal.
Okay, that's
Typically. Now that all that can change with modifiers.
it's sort of like there's rules, but then there's exceptions.
There's not.
Yeah,
Lots of exceptions to the rule. That's what makes it so much fun.
it's a never ending, things
Yes.
learning, things.
It is fun. It is fun.
Just when you think you know a little bit,
You don't know
you
nothing.
don't know anything.
Yeah. So in our last 15 minutes here, so I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the resources that exist out there for people. If you start to get interested in some of these. And I know one that a lot of people use a lot are these horse color, coat color calculators.
Mhm.
Those are really fun, but you do have to know what kind of colors you're looking at to begin with.
Yes.
So I know that I am willing to answer questions privately for people if they have horses or babies born and they want to know. There's about 5 people that message me every time they have a baby born and say, what is it? Or what do you expect? Or what do you think this is? And I have no problem answering those questions. I know Kim would probably be the same way.
I have a clientele that does that as well. What do I got here? Well, this is what you got.
So feel free to message us privately anytime when you look at something like this. So let's put in a horse just for fun. Go into the dam section and put in a red dun. Then put in pattern. She's not so solid. And then no gray. And then you can take in those. So this would be either my horse or Kim's horse. And then we can say, so actually we'll put in under pattern, put in Tobiano, and I'll put in my red dun mare that
There
I
you go.
bred last year. So Olivia is a red dun Toby, and she was bred to a black horse, but he is also silvered apple and roan. So that'll be under color. Go up back to color.
Oh,
And it should say silvered apple. And then there's also a roan silvered apple.
Right there. Yep. Nope. Yep. Right there.
That's silvered apple, but not roan. There's going to be silvered apple roan. Go down more.
Oh, there it is. Right there. Oh, I'm pointing at the screen like
There
you
you
can
go.
see it.
Okay. And then he had no pattern and no gray. She is heterozygous for a Goody. So she had one big A, little a. She did not have silver, so non-silver carrier. She was heterozygous dun, so one dun gene, and she had one Tobiano gene. The sire was a known homozygous black. So that's where it's the biggie and the extension. He was heterozygous silver, meaning he had one silver gene, which is a dilution gene, just like cream dun, in the respect that it only works on black pigment. So on a red horse or a sorrel chestnut, it's hidden.
And then
Then he was heterozygous roan as well, meaning one roan gene.
so these were all your options?
Those
yes.
were all my options.
I've never had a foal with this many options, to
I know.
be honest.
So you can take into play if you want to go up and do mine and limit the options.
So, but
here.
is that not crazy? So we ended up with, I'm pretty confident that he had a silvered apple roan Tobiano colt.
Wow.
So it's a 3.13 chance to have that combination.
Out of all of those.
Wow.
It
So-
was a lot of fun to see what you would get.
Yeah, I bet. So what I've learned about this is these things make a difference. So
Yes.
if you hit
Huge.
unknown here,
Yes.
um,
So
And
like take
lot of-
into account this sire, same color, and then go,
Take out the Tobiano.
yeah, take the Toby out. That's the difference. On the
part-
dam side,
okay.
So now look at the results.
now go, no, I'm doing Mercy. Go up to the color and do buckskin. And then change the red carrier. There you go. And then homozygous Goody. And then there's your options there.
And she ended up having
A silver bay.
Silver bay,
Silver Bay.
a 12.5%.
So it's cool how it changes different.
Right. And if people remember, these are sort of what we talked about going through, you know, the big E and the little E.
Yes.
But you have to know those things for this to work right. If you put unknown here, I think it just assumes that it's a red carrier.
So when you click unknown, it calculates all of those variables, red and black and a Goody. A Goody, unknown. There you go.
So it changes your results. So that's the only thing I'll tell people, but these are great, but if you don't know all the information, they're sort of only as good as the information you put
That's
in.
correct.
And then if you add gray on here, then it changes all your
And
Options.
with that,
50% of them will be gray.
Yeah, 50% of them are going to be gray.
They'll just, their base color may change, but they'll still be gray.
Yes.
So, but this is animalgenetics.com. I don't know if there's other ones of these. This is the one that I was familiar with.
That's one of the best. UC Davis is another really good site to read up on articles. I don't necessarily like their animal genetic site or their coat color calculator, as well as I like animal genetics, but they have a lot of good articles about color on it.
All right. And I'll share this on the Regional Foxtrotting Horse Foundation Facebook page. So if you guys want to go to this, you'll get a direct link. Other resources you would, so if someone really wants to get into this and really wants to learn, where do they start?
I mean, you're not going to go to your wiki pages for sure, but it is always somewhere people start.
Wikipedia.
You can always just kind of do the typical Facebook, you know, there's equine genetic coat color genetic pages.
And that is
that you
all.
can join.
Yeah.
They're really informative, but they tend to be very big sticklers for the genetic rules
Correct
that they have
terms.
posted.
Yeah. It's called Equine
There's
Genetic.
2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. Just go. Best thing to do is just to go on the Facebook and type in Equine Genetics, and you'll get a list of different ones. Some of them are really sticklers on using the correct terminology. So when you're looking for an answer, I would say post a picture and say, this is my horse. What am I
But they're
looking
also
at?
very friendly for beginners to
Yeah.
learn more information.
But the reason they want correct terminology is because everybody's learning on that site. So they want to use the correct terminology so people know.
Right. And then you guys mentioned that people can reach out to you. Susan, I think you guys have a farm Facebook page. That's public. All right. So if people want to reach out, and I'll share that too on our Facebook page. Kimberly, do you have a public thing, or they can just search?
They just reach out to me. I think after we get our house built, I may start a page, but right now I've got too much in the works.
No, I totally understand that. I just didn't want people, sending you spam messages if the public side.
They can send it to my personal page. I'm pretty good about tracking it and looking, see if it's just spam or real people.
All right. Well, there's certainly a lot to learn about this. And I will say, if you're going to get into breeding, this is very helpful to at least understand your own herd of what you got going on. Anyone that knows my mother knows that bay is her favorite color. And we've been on the quest. We've produced a lot of colors, but actually bay has not been one of them. So, it's sort of interesting, everyone has a favorite color, and, Susan mentioned ahead of time, it doesn't replace gait and disposition, all those things we love about the breed, but it certainly does add a little icing here and there when it's something.
It completes the unicorn.
Yep, absolutely. So, any final words from either of you that if someone interested in this topic, there's things that you want to share with them?
I think the biggest thing is don't give up, don't get frustrated when it's confusing at first. It is a lot of information and it is complicated when you first start. Once you've kind of got the basics understood, it becomes so much easier. But if in doubt, test. That is the easiest way to learn information, and then you'll have it forever, so you can make those educated decisions on what you want to go for if you're looking to create something specific.
I highly recommend the testing. That's the best way to go.
So that leads me to another question. Where do you guys get them tested at?
I use both UC Davis and Animal Genetics in Tallahassee.
So I use Animal Genetics for the most part, but there are some tests that Animal Genetics do not offer like the Roan. So you have to go somewhere else like UC Davis. Those are the top 2.
Okay. Very good. Well, again, thank you, ladies, so much for doing this. I didn't twist your arm too bad to get you on video, did I?
I've tried to hide from the camera, but I can't.
No, but I think this is an important topic just to kind of learn. I mean, even if you're just a casual horse owner, you know, kind of understanding the genetics behind your horse's color is kind of fun to share with people and to understand. And if you get into breeding, it's really important. So I really appreciate you guys being willing to share your knowledge, and again, keeping it sort of that high level discussion so that we all could understand it. I appreciate that a
I
great
hope it
deal.
didn't make it too confusing.
No, not at all. You know, I think common terms really help, you know, as you're starting to learn some of this stuff. So I appreciate that quite a bit, and I'm sure everyone learned a great deal. So for all of you that are watching, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This will archive on our Facebook page, so if you missed part of it, you can go back and watch it. And we are working on archiving all of these conversations on a YouTube site so that they're there and you can continue to learn. I think this is our 11th one at this point. And we have some more coming up, and we love topic suggestions. So send us a message with topics as well. So with that, everyone go out, enjoy the evening. Beautiful weather here. I hope it's beautiful weather where you guys are. And I know you have some guys cooking you dinner, so I won't keep you from that.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
thanks anyone
you.
for watching.
Yep. Thank you guys.